President Trump just doubled tariffs on imported steel and aluminum to 50%, and Coca-Cola, of all companies, is in the crosshairs. It sounds almost unreal, right? One day your favorite soda rolls off the production line as usual. The next, the very cans it's packed in could cost twice as much to make. That's exactly what happened on June 4th, 2025, when this seismic tariff hike hit the nation. The question on everyone's mind: how will this sudden shockwave ripple through the beverage world, affect production costs, and ultimately change what lands in your fridge? Think of it like a domino effect. A spike in metal prices doesn't just hit factories, it travels down supply chains, nudges up costs, and finally shows up on store shelves. For a company like Coca-Cola, which produces billions of cans every year, this is more than a budget headache. It's a high-stakes challenge that could reshape pricing, packaging, and even the choices consumers make at the grocery store. And it's not just soda fans who should pay attention. This move is a lens into the bigger picture of American industry, trade policy, and how a single decision in Washington can ripple across households and businesses alike. By the end of this video, you'll see why a policy aimed at boosting domestic metal industries might have consequences nobody saw coming. So why did President Trump decide to double these tariffs? The administration's argument is straightforward: protect and strengthen America's domestic steel and aluminum industries. The idea is that by making imported metals more expensive, U.S. companies can compete better, and American factories will hum back to life. On paper, it sounds like a win for jobs and national security. But here's the kicker. This policy shift didn't just tweak numbers. Doubling tariffs to 50% is like suddenly slamming the brakes on a speeding car. It's abrupt, dramatic, and sends shockwaves through industries that rely heavily on imported metals. Aluminum, in particular, isn't just for cans. It's a backbone for construction, automotive parts, electronics, and countless other products. So when prices spike overnight, the effects are immediate and wide-reaching. Think of aluminum as the oil in the engine of many U.S. industries. Without it flowing smoothly, production stalls, costs rise, and businesses are forced to rethink their strategies fast. This context sets the stage for why Coca-Cola, a household name, suddenly finds itself navigating one of the most turbulent periods in its operational history. Coca-Cola's reliance on aluminum cans is massive. Every year, the company produces billions of beverages, and the iconic aluminum can isn't just packaging, it's a core part of their brand identity. Aluminum is lightweight, recyclable, and helps preserve the taste and quality of the drink. But with the new 50% tariffs, the price of imported aluminum is surging, and that immediately puts pressure on Coca-Cola's production costs. What once was a predictable supply suddenly feels like navigating a minefield. CEO James Quincy didn't mince words when addressing the situation. He warned that the sudden spike in aluminum costs threatens to pour cold water over operations and could even affect consumers directly. For a company that prides itself on keeping its products accessible and affordable, that's a serious concern. Quincy's comments underline the fact that even the biggest global brands are not insulated from policy decisions that ripple across supply chains. This isn't just accounting math, it's a tangible risk to the millions of cans produced daily. The Can Manufacturers Institute echoed Quincy's concerns, highlighting that the tariff hike will inevitably drive up the cost of aluminum cans. And when cans cost more, companies face tough choices: absorb the higher prices, pass them on to consumers, or explore alternatives like plastic or glass packaging. Each option comes with trade-offs, from environmental concerns to brand loyalty challenges. In short, Coca-Cola isn't just reacting to a numbers game, it's navigating a high-stakes balancing act that could reshape how the world's most famous soda is packaged and sold. Faced with soaring aluminum prices, Coca-Cola is exploring alternatives like PET plastic bottles or even glass packaging. On paper, switching materials might seem simple. Just replace one container with another. But in reality, it's a complex puzzle. Plastic bottles might be cheaper in the short term, but they raise environmental concerns, especially as consumers increasingly demand sustainable options. Glass, meanwhile, preserves taste well, but is heavier, more fragile, and more expensive to transport. Brand loyalty is another challenge. Millions of people associate Coca-Cola with its classic aluminum cans. The feel of a chilled can in your hand is part of the experience. Switching to plastic could risk alienating fans who value tradition. Coca-Cola must weigh every move carefully. Changing packaging too quickly could upset loyal customers, while sticking with aluminum could squeeze margins painfully. This dilemma highlights the strategic tightrope Coca-Cola is walking. It's not just about reducing costs, it's about balancing consumer expectations, environmental responsibility, and operational efficiency. Every decision here has ripple effects that go far beyond the factory floor, shaping both the company's brand image and its bottom line in a market already rattled by policy shocks. The aluminum supply chain in the United States is more fragile than most people realize. In 2023, about 44% of America's aluminum came from imports, with Canada leading as the top supplier. This means that any disruption, like a sudden 50% tariff, doesn't just increase costs, it threatens the steady flow of materials that factories rely on every day. For Coca-Cola, whose production line depends on millions of cans arriving on schedule, even a small bottleneck could create major delays. Think of the supply chain like a highway system. Aluminum flows smoothly when lanes are open, but these tariffs act like sudden roadblocks, slowing traffic and forcing companies to find detours. If domestic production ramps up, it can help, but even firing up every idle U.S. smelter wouldn't meet total demand. That leaves companies in a tight spot, higher costs and limited availability, all while trying to keep products on store shelves without disappointing customers. This tangled network shows that policy decisions have cascading effects. It's not just about the price per ton of aluminum, it's about the reliability of the entire chain from mining and smelting to delivery at factories. For Coca-Cola and others, this means constantly recalibrating logistics, exploring new suppliers, and preparing for unexpected hiccups, all under intense financial pressure. Coca-Cola isn't the only company feeling the heat. The 50% tariffs ripple across the entire beverage and food sector. Craft breweries, for example, operate on smaller budgets and tighter margins. A sudden spike in aluminum prices forces them to make tough decisions. Absorb the higher costs and shrink profits, or pass the increases on to customers, risking a drop in sales. Even giants like Campbell's and other food manufacturers are bracing for similar pressures, since packaging and imported materials are suddenly pricier. This isn't just about paying more for cans. The tariffs highlight structural vulnerabilities in the supply chain. Companies must rethink sourcing, production schedules, and even packaging strategies. Some might shift to alternatives like glass or plastic, while others may negotiate new deals with domestic suppliers. Each move has trade-offs, creating a ripple effect that touches pricing, consumer experience, and brand perception. The key takeaway? This is a systemic problem, not a single company challenge. From soda to soups, the tariffs expose how interconnected industries are, and how a policy aimed at one sector can send shockwaves through many others. Coca-Cola may be the headline grabber, but behind the scenes, countless businesses are recalibrating operations to survive in this new landscape. The aluminum tariff shock isn't just a headache for companies, it has real consequences for consumers. When Coca-Cola and other beverage makers face higher production costs, the price of a soda can climb at your local grocery store or vending machine. Even a modest increase per can adds up quickly when you consider millions of cans sold daily across the country. That's money leaving your wallet for products that used to be affordable, showing just how quickly policy decisions trickle down to everyday life. Beyond retail prices, there's a broader economic ripple effect. Rising aluminum costs can strain manufacturing budgets, forcing companies to cut back in other areas. Jobs in production, logistics, and retail could feel the squeeze as firms adjust spending. Smaller suppliers and service providers connected to the aluminum and beverage industries are also at risk, demonstrating how tightly linked employment, production, and consumer prices truly are. Essentially, the tariff doesn't just target metal imports, it stretches across the entire economic ecosystem. Experts warn that even if every idle U.S. aluminum smelter fired up tomorrow, it still wouldn't fully meet national demand. This highlights a key challenge. Protectionist policies can't magically solve supply shortages. Instead, they may push costs up while leaving the underlying scarcity unresolved. For consumers, this means a higher likelihood of price hikes, occasional shortages, and a shift in how companies package and sell their products. A reminder that global supply chains and domestic policies are inextricably linked. Coca-Cola isn't sitting idle while aluminum prices soar. The company is taking a multi-pronged approach to navigate this crisis. First, they're exploring alternative packaging like PET plastic bottles and glass containers. While these options come with trade-offs, environmental concerns, transportation costs, and consumer preferences, they provide a flexible way to maintain production without letting costs spiral out of control. Pricing strategy is another key tool. Coca-Cola knows that even small price hikes can influence consumer behavior, so they're calculating carefully where and how to adjust prices. At the same time, the company is actively lobbying Washington for exemptions or relief, arguing that these tariffs, while intended to help domestic industries, could do more harm than good for American businesses. This strategy isn't just reactive, it's a study in resilience. By balancing packaging alternatives, careful pricing, and political advocacy, Coca-Cola is aiming to maintain brand loyalty, protect its margins, and stay competitive. For viewers, it's a lesson in how large companies respond under sudden policy pressure, using creativity, strategy, and quick decision-making to keep operations running smoothly. The tariffs aren't just shaking up businesses, they're stirring diplomatic friction too. Key trade partners like Canada and Mexico, who supply a significant portion of U.S. aluminum, have criticized the 50% hike as a threat to stable trade relationships. Across the Atlantic, the European Union has hinted at possible retaliatory measures if negotiations don't resolve the dispute, adding another layer of uncertainty for American companies. For Coca-Cola and other global players, this means navigating a landscape where business strategy and geopolitics intersect. Decisions about sourcing, pricing, and production are now influenced not only by costs, but also by international relations. A factory in the United States might face higher tariffs, while exports to Europe could be threatened by countermeasures, creating a complex web of financial and operational risks. This political turbulence reinforces a key reality: global supply chains don't operate in isolation. A decision in Washington can ripple across borders, impacting trade, corporate strategy, and even the products consumers find on store shelves. Companies must remain agile, responding not only to market pressures but also to the shifting political environment that shapes the rules of the game. So to understand the stakes of this 50% aluminum and steel tariff, it really helps to look at history. In the past, similar tariffs were put in place with the goal of protecting domestic industries. For example, steel tariffs in earlier years were meant to revive American manufacturing and create jobs. Now, while these policies did boost domestic production to some extent, they also had unintended consequences. Companies faced higher input costs, some jobs were actually lost in downstream industries, and consumers ultimately paid more for everyday products. The difference this time is the scale. Doubling the tariffs to 50% is pretty much unprecedented in recent decades, and honestly, it creates pressures that are far more intense than previous measures. Coca-Cola and other companies find themselves in a situation where not only prices, but also the availability of aluminum could become a real issue. Historical data shows that past tariffs often triggered a ripple effect through related sectors: manufacturing, logistics, retail. And this really reminds us that protectionist policies can create winners and losers at the same time. Looking at the historical record also highlights a lesson in strategy. Companies that survived prior tariff shocks did so by innovating, diversifying suppliers, and adapting their production processes. For Coca-Cola, these lessons are, more relevant than ever. They serve as a guide for navigating the current policy landscape, balancing immediate cost pressures with long-term operational resilience, and preparing for the very real possibility that these tariffs could reshape the industry for years to come. Coca-Cola and other companies are being forced to innovate like never before. When traditional supply chains are disrupted and costs rise, creativity becomes a survival tool. Coca-Cola is exploring new packaging technologies, redesigning production lines, and optimizing logistics to reduce reliance on imported aluminum. These innovations aren't just stopgap measures. They could, honestly, redefine efficiency and sustainability across the beverage industry. Smaller players, like craft breweries, are also finding ways to adapt. Some are experimenting with lighter packaging, local sourcing, or even limited edition runs in alternative materials. While these moves can be costly up front, they offer flexibility and resilience in a market where tariffs and policy changes can shift overnight. The pressure to innovate forces companies to think beyond traditional approaches and explore solutions that might have been considered too risky or expensive in stable times. In the long run, this crisis may produce unexpected benefits. Companies that adapt effectively could emerge stronger, more efficient, and better prepared for future disruptions. Coca-Cola's strategic responses serve as a case study in resilience, showing that even the largest global brands must continuously evolve, innovate, and think creatively when external forces disrupt their business environment. So what does all this mean for the average consumer? First, expect the possibility of higher prices on products that rely heavily on aluminum, like soda, beer, and canned foods. Even a small increase per can or bottle can add up across weekly grocery trips, directly impacting household budgets. Second, packaging changes may become more common. You might see Coca-Cola and other beverage brands using more plastic or glass instead of aluminum cans. While these alternatives can help companies manage costs, they also affect convenience, taste experience, and environmental impact. For example, plastic bottles are lighter but less sustainable, while glass preserves flavor but is heavier and harder to transport. Finally, this situation is a reminder of how interconnected global supply chains are. A policy decision in Washington doesn't stay there. It travels through factories, shipping networks, and retail stores before reaching your hands. Paying attention to these changes can help consumers understand why prices fluctuate, why packaging looks different, and how global economics touches everyday life in ways we rarely notice. The 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum have created a high-stakes challenge for companies across the United States, and Coca-Cola is a prime example of how a global brand must respond under pressure. From exploring alternative packaging to lobbying for exemptions and adjusting pricing strategies, the company is navigating a turbulent landscape that affects every step of its operations. This situation isn't just about aluminum costs, it's about resilience, strategic thinking, and the ability to adapt quickly in an unpredictable business environment. The ripple effects of these tariffs extend far beyond Coca-Cola. Smaller businesses, craft breweries, food manufacturers, and countless suppliers are all recalibrating their strategies to survive. Consumers may notice higher prices, packaging changes, or limited product availability, highlighting how interconnected the global supply chain really is. What starts as a policy decision in Washington travels through industries, affecting millions of households and reshaping the market in ways that are both visible and subtle. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you think these tariffs will strengthen American industry, or will they hurt businesses and consumers more? How should companies balance cost pressures with brand loyalty and environmental concerns? Are alternatives like plastic or glass the right move, or do they come with their own challenges? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe to stay updated on future deep dives, and keep your curiosity in overdrive. The world of business policy and consumer impact is always evolving, and I will keep you in the driver's seat.